If you're calling me, I don't hear you well.
The 9,800th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Turkey to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I intend to invite the following briefers to participate in the meeting. Ms. Azumi Nakamitsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. I understand the representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor. You have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. You did not announce the second briefer, and my point of order is largely dedicated to that, but I'm certain that you will do that after I deliver my statement. Before this meeting is to begin, I wish to once again draw the attention of the Security Council membership to the fact that the first week of the U.S. presidency of the Security Council has been punctuated by such egregious procedural violations and clumsy manipulations that they would suffice for the entire year ahead of us. What is absolutely clear is that in advancing the interests of the outgoing U.S. administration, that team advancing the interests of the U.S. outgoing administration is not even trying to create a semblance of compliance with the rules of the Security Council. They are seeking to advance a single goal, to cement their ideological priorities at the Security Council platform. For the sake of this, for the third consecutive day, the Security Council has had heinous reporters from civil society imposed upon it. Not only do they not provide any added value to this discussion, but through their emotionally charged, unsubstantiated monologues, they have transformed meetings of the Security Council into a farce. And this is precisely what the international community observed on Tuesday during the meeting on the situation on Syria, when well-known fabricators and liars were invited from the White Helmets NGO were invited to participate in the Security Council meeting. And the same egregious situation was repeated yesterday during the meeting on the issue of children in the context of the Ukrainian crisis, where effectively a whole three representatives of NGOs spoke. We are perfectly aware that the individual represented, seated at the Ukrainian seat is a representative of civil society, and we did not see any confirmation of how this individual was in any way authorized to speak on behalf of a state. It is clear that in order to avoid awkward questions, the presidency did not deem it necessary, contrary to established practice, to inform members of the Security Council in advance that not a permanent representative will speak under Rule 37. Not a permanent representative of a state will speak under Rule 37. This was not something that the Council was informed of. And the list of speakers circulated, this individual was not on that list of speakers. There is no doubt that today's briefer from civil society will also advance Washington's manuals and adhere to them, and will not provide any new perspective for the consideration of the issue on the agenda. What is the point of wasting the Council's members' time on this farce? We are very much concerned about all this in terms of the fact that this undermines the authority of the Security Council. The Council should not become a platform for American inter-party conflict or campaign rallies. If the entire month continues based on what we have, in the same way that this week has advanced, if the U.S. presidency continues to generously provide airtime to the Council to myriad propagandists, crooks engaged in and PR for their advisors and public relations representatives, then the entire month of January will become the Security Council will transform in the month of January into a cheap talk show. And this will have catastrophic consequences, not just for the reputation of the Security Council, but also when it comes to the crises on the ground. We call upon the presidency to give this some thought, and for the membership of the Security Council not to indulge such behavior. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also intend to invite, in addition to Ms. Nakamitsu, Mr. Nidal Shikani, Director General of the Chemical Violations Documentation Center of Syria. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2024/861, a letter dated 26 November 2024 from the Secretary General addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I thank Council members for the opportunity to brief you once again on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2118 on the elimination of the chemical weapons program of the Syrian Arab Republic. Before I begin my part of the briefing, I wish to state the United Nations' concern regarding the deteriorating security situation in Syria and reiterate the appeal by UN Special Envoy for Syria, Mr. Geir Pedersen, in this Council just 2 days ago for de-escalation and calm, and for all parties to respect their obligations under international law to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. Since the last consideration of this matter by this Council, consistent with established practice, the Office for Disarmament Affairs has been in regular contact with its counterparts in the OPCW Technical Secretariat on activities related to Resolution 2118. Mr. President, since the Council's previous meeting on this matter, the OPCW Declaration Assessment Team, or DAT, has continued its efforts to clarify all outstanding issues regarding the initial declaration and subsequent declarations submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic. Following the delays reported at the Council's previous meeting on this matter, the 28th round of consultations between the DAT and the Syrian National Authority took place between 10 and 18 September 2024. I am informed that during this round of consultations, the DAT conducted technical meetings with experts from the Syrian National Authority, during which the status of outstanding issue was discussed. As of the date of this report, the DAT continues to analyze the information gathered during the 28th round of consultations from the documents submitted by the Syrian National Authority, interviews, and explanations provided by Syrian experts. The DAT has also continued to follow up with the Syrian National Authority with regard to the results of the analysis of the samples collected in May 2024 in order for the DAT to proceed with its assessment of the relevant outstanding issues. Through a note verbal dated 11th of November 2024, the Syrian National Authority provided explanations of the results of the analysis of these samples. The DAT is currently assessing the information provided and will report on the outcome of this assessment in due course. I have also been informed that through a note verbal dated 1st of November 2024, DAT requested the Syrian National Authority to identify at the earliest among the more than 1,000 pages of information submitted during the 28th round of consultations, those elements relevant to the explanations it had provided to progress in resolving outstanding issues. As of the date of this report, the OPCW Technical Secretariat had not received the Syrian National Authority's response to this request. Mr. President, therefore, as previously reported, the DAT has raised and reported a total of 26 outstanding issues with regard to the Syrian Arab Republic's declaration, of which 19 remain unresolved. These include 2 recently opened outstanding issues related to potentially undeclared full-scale development and production of chemical weapons at 2 declared chemical weapons-related facilities, which were previously declared as having never been in operation. The OPCW Technical Secretariat reports that, at this stage, the substance of the 19 outstanding issues remains a serious concern, as it involves large quantities of chemical warfare agents and munitions that were reportedly destroyed or otherwise consumed prior to the Syrian Arab Republic's accession to the Chemical Weapons Convention, the fate of which cannot be fully verified by the OPCW. It also involves potentially large quantities of chemical warfare agents, the production which has not been declared by the Syrian Arab Republic to the OPCW Technical Secretariat. I reiterate that this is extremely worrying. Mr. President, I have been informed that the 11th round of inspections of Barza and Jamraya facilities of the Scientific Studies and Research Center, or SSRC, took place from 12 to 20th November 2024, after a postponement from September due to security reasons. The OPCW Technical Secretariat will report on the outcome of these inspections in due course, and is planning for the 12th round of inspections to take place before the end of the year. As of the date of this month's report, the OPCW Technical Secretariat has not received any new information that might resolve the issues related to the presence of a Schedule II chemical in the samples collected during the November 2018 inspection, and to the origin and usage of a chemical of dual-use nature observed by the inspecting team during the September 2022 inspection at the SSRC Barza facilities. The OPCW Technical Secretariat will further engage on these issues with the Syrian National Authority during the next round of SSRC inspections. As reported previously, the OPCW Technical Secretariat has also requested information regarding the unauthorized movement of the 2 cylinders related to the chemical weapon incident that took place in Douma on 7th of April 2018, which were allegedly destroyed in an attack on a chemical weapons production facility. I have been informed that, as of the date of this report, the Technical Secretariat has not received a response to this request. Mr. President, the OPCW Technical Secretariat remains fully committed to implementing its mandate aimed at verifying the fulfillment of the Syrian Arab Republic's declaration obligations under the Convention, decisions by OPCW policy-making organs, and Security Council resolutions. However, as has been previously emphasized, full cooperation by the Syrian Arab Republic with the OPCW Technical Secretariat is essential to closing all outstanding issues. Considering the identified gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies that remain unresolved, at this time, the OPCW Technical Secretariat assesses that the declaration submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic still cannot be considered accurate and complete in accordance with the Chemical Weapons Convention. I call upon the Syrian Arab Republic to cooperate with the OPCW Technical Secretariat and respond with urgency to all of the Technical Secretariat's requests. Mr. President, I have been advised that the OPCW Fact-Finding Mission, or FFM, continues to study all available information related to allegations of the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic and will issue further reports in due course. The Investigation and Identification Team, or IIT, also continues its investigations into incidents in which the fact-finding mission has determined that chemical weapons were used or likely used in the Syrian Arab Republic and will issue further reports in due course. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, Last week, the world observed the Day of Remembrance for all victims of chemical warfare. In his message to mark the occasion and to pay tribute to all those who have been killed or injured by such horrific weapons, the Secretary General called upon the global community to reaffirm their commitment to the Chemical Weapons Convention and end impunity and live up to the Pact for the Future's pledge for a world free of such weapons. I urge the members of this Council to unite and show leadership in demonstrating that any use of chemical weapons is unacceptable. The United Nations will continue to do our part to support all efforts to uphold the norm against the use of chemical weapons, anywhere, at any time. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Ms. Nakamitsu for her briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Nidal Shikani. Mr. Shikani, you have the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset to express my sincere thanks to the Friends of Syria, as well as the delegation of the United States of America, for this valuable and fruitful invitation, which gave us this opportunity to shed light on this thorny and sensitive dossier. Syria has witnessed one of the most terrifying chapters in the history of the region due to the use of chemical weapons. Chemical weapons have turned the lives of Syrians into hell. It pushed the entire world into a political and legal conflict that prevented them from the complete elimination of chemical arsenals, which still pose a serious danger to international peace and security. According to the documentations of the Chemical Violations Documentation Center of Syria, 262 chemical weapons uses have been recorded, resulting in the killing of 3,423 victims and the injury of around 14,000 civilians. The use of such weapons have led to deformed childbirths and psychological trauma to the victims, in addition to the death of animals and the destruction of soil. From the outset, our units have provided full support to the OPCW and all the tasks assigned to international investigative teams. This included the fact-finding mission, the joint verification mechanism, the investigation and identification team, and the international impartial and independent mechanism. In this vein, it is important to commend the important effort of the OPCW since the beginning of its work, when it created accountability tools to ensure a world free of chemical weapons. We have supported most international investigations and gathered thousands of documented evidence which cannot be challenged. This aimed to prove that chemical weapons were used for hostile purposes. We were also attempting to identify those involved, those perpetrators, including the detection of the chain of command. This documentation contributed to ensuring the rights of the victims on the one hand, and on the other hand, to strengthen the capacity of state parties to implement the Chemical Weapons Convention. It will also lead to a deeper understanding of the Chemical Weapons Convention and the different declarations, including the Declaration of Syria. Following the issuance of the UN Security Council Resolution 2118 of 2013, which demanded the elimination of the Syrian chemical arsenal and the destruction of its stockpile, chlorine was used in different occasions and locations, and it continued for 5 years. The Serine also was used in Damo and Latamia, and in both cities the sarin used matched the declared Syrian stock. Such violations prove the continued manipulation of the Syrian Arab Republic with OPCW. The reports of the organization mentioned the outstanding issues, and it seems that the Syrian Arab Republic adopted a policy of procrastination and the non-fulfillment of its obligations under the Convention and UN Council resolutions in light of the unresolved gaps and contradictions. Therefore, their declaration cannot be considered accurate and complete. The efforts made by the fact-finding mission since 2014 and up till this very date to document the use of chemical weapons as weapons of war contribute to the protection of the rights of state parties. It also helped to establish cases on which mandates were established to identify the perpetrators of such crimes. Similarly, the James reports and the investigation and identification team have made effort to prove the systematic use of chemical weapons, which is a flagrant challenge to UN Security Council resolutions and a violation of the rights of state parties. It is also a threat to international peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, chemical weapons issues, including those related to Syria's opaque stockpile, need urgent and firm international action. We have to think outside the box and adopt new strategies that will ensure a world free from weapons of mass destruction and ensure holding the users of such weapons to accountability. On another side, countries supporting the Syrian regime must stop protecting it. They must stop protecting this chemical terrorist weaponry, which threatens Syrians, violates international conventions, and instead must support accountability and maintain the rights of the parties. Syria's non-accession to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court poses a major challenge to many issues. Therefore, the establishment of an independent judicial entity with a global mandate to hold those involved accountable and ensure that they will not go unpunished is essential. This entity would strengthen the concept of the chemical weapons Convention and ensure their eradication in the future. To conclude, the use of chemical weapons in the 21st century is a stain on humanity. It's also a permanent danger that must be dealt with seriously and rigorously to ensure a world free of weapons of mass destruction and to achieve the goals for which the UN Security Council was established, as well as other UN entities. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Shikani for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Madam Izumi Nakamitsu, for her briefing. There was nothing fundamentally new that we heard today. The OPCW Technical Secretariat continues to obediently comply with Western orders to taint the reputation of both Syria and its allies. Platitudinous premises are advanced about the alleged failure by Syria to comply with its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention. At the same time, what is being ignored? Is the assistance being provided by Damascus to the staff of the mission on the assessment of the initial declaration in Syria? As is the fact, this fact is also ignored, that the Syrians are continuing to conscientiously cooperate with the OPCW. And this, after the decision advanced and pushed through by the West to strip Damascus of its rights and lift its immunities under the CWC, they could have decided not to do so, but they are cooperating. Any objective observer or expert, our Western colleagues, of course, are not that, cannot deny the fact that the Syrian authorities have been demonstrating utmost responsibility when it comes to the provision of documentation with the aim of closing outstanding questions related to the initial declaration. Syria, in general, remains the state that is most subject to most significant scrutiny by the of the states parties to the CWC. Over the past 11 years, 150 technical meetings were carried out, 45 visits were carried out to facilities, 180 samples were collected, and thousands of pages of documents were received. But despite all of this, new fabricated accusations continue to be mount against Damascus. Suffice it to recall the absurd story with the canisters linked to the 2008 incident in Duma, which were destroyed as a result of an Israeli missile strike. The those Westerners who attained Syria are well aware of this, but they continue nonetheless to raise this issue, including at the United Nations Security Council. Distinguished colleagues, we do not see any point today in dwelling on the technical details of the Syrian chemical dossier. We are aware that during today's meeting there will be significant criticism against Syria and possibly Russia. And it is possible that there will be a premiere, so to speak, of new allegations being trotted out. We would simply note that the general scheme vis-a-vis the meeting and the topic of the Syrian chemical weapons dossier, regardless of what Syria may state, this is not accepted by the West. Regardless of what Syria may do, regardless of what good faith steps Syria may undertake, this is always, in the version of the West, always turns out to be insufficient. Everything else is mere nuance, which is meaningless and does not reverse this trend in any way. Instead of this technical discussion, we will attempt to take stock of the 4 years of work on the Syrian chemical weapons dossier by our United States colleagues. Lame ducks, which the U.S. refers to such administrations, who are striving, as we perfectly see in the month of their presidency, they are doing everything possible to cement the priorities of the outgoing Biden administration, including the most radical and absurd anti-Syria policies. In addition to the fact that the discussion of the issue of implementation of Resolution 2118, in light of the above-mentioned factors, is pointless. An important result is the fact that international cooperation has been damaged. International cooperation on the compliance with the CWC as a whole. For our sly Western colleagues are playing this game called judge and accuse Syria and Russia contrary to fact, contrary to common sense. They're playing this game at two fora simultaneously, both in New York and at The Hague. In this time, we have borne witness to unprecedented fabrications, and the most arrogant lies, which unfortunately the OPCW Technical Secretariat is complicit in. And the Director General, Fernando Arias, is also actively involved in this. He has forgotten his obligation to operate in an objective and impartial manner. Suffice it to recall how we attempted to take advantage of his appearance before us in 2021 in order to burnish the reputation of the Technical Secretariat. To that end, all that was necessary was for honest responses to be provided for concrete questions linked first and foremost with the report of the fact-finding mission on the incident in Duma. We had no doubt, and we have no doubt about the fact that this was staged, and professional actors and fabricators from the White Helmets, a pseudo-humanitarian organization, organization. They were involved in this. And nobody can have them, and nobody with any common sense or with any remnant of conscience left. And they have a number of inspectors do have this conscience and good faith who refuted the fabrications in the final report of the fact-finding mission on the incident in Duma and the conclusions there contained in there which they did not agree with. These people did not wish to lie. They did not wish to violate those obligations which they assumed, and yet this is despite the fact that they cannot be suspected of having sympathy for Syria or the Russian Federation. And how did our Western colleagues and Mr. Arias, who has been advancing their interest, how did they react to this? Did they give them the floor? Did they organize a frank and impartial investigation in the spirit of the principle of freedom of speech with which the West has championed? No. With respect to them, there was a shameful persecution organized. There were attempts to tarnish their reputation, to compromise them, so that, God forbid, a word of truth emerge through the tangled web of lies which the staged fabrication in Duma was created as. And then it seemed to many that this was a one-off incident, but no, this is a pattern of behavior which had been developed on the basis of the incident with the poisoning of the Skripals in the United Kingdom in March of 2018. And this lay at the basis of the horrific staging in Bucha in 2022, which had nothing to do with the purview of this Chemical Weapons Convention, but this is clearly dovetails with the policy of blame it all on the Russian Federation. And these two episodes are united by the fact that not on a single one of those incidents can we have the most basic evidence provided, nor any single response to our numerous questions. Instead of establishing the truth around the incident in Duma, and instead of thereby restoring the faith that has been undermined in their vis-a-vis their genuine motivations and tasks in working on the chemical weapons dossier, the West continued to lie, transforming this web of lies into a massive knot. Instead of a frank and objective investigation, at the OPCW, a team was illegitimately established of professional fabricators, and this has now been entitled the Identification Investigation Team. The IIT. Now they are not shying away from anything. They're violating the most basic principles of the organization, specifically the methodology for chain of custody, which is stipulated under the CWC. The IIT began to rubber stamp reports on new investigations into incidents without even making any effort to travel to where they allegedly occurred. Of course, as we have repeatedly announced, we categorically refute any, both past and future, reports from these armchair experts. And how should we approach this in April of 2018? Representatives from the US, the UK, and France, in breach of the UN Charter, in breach of international law, launched more than 100 missiles as well as guided bombs targeting sites in Syria that they alleged were facilities linked to that country's chemical weapons program. So instead of dispatching OPCW experts there, which the Syrians were willing to accept, Western countries simply destroy possible evidence, single-handedly handed down accusations and handed down a verdict and implemented it. Where is any logic? Where is there any common sense here? The result of these long-standing efforts is quite obvious. This is staggering levels of politicization for this once purely technical organization, one of whose priority tasks was facilitating economic and technical development as well as assisting in the development of key industrial capabilities for developing countries. Moreover, there is clear damage being done to the chemical weapons prohibition regime as a whole. The ability of the organization to react to real threats is being undermined. Real threats faced by the international community in the area of chemical disarmament and non-proliferation of chemical weapons. And under these circumstances, ladies and gentlemen, you're demanding of us and Syrians that we cooperate, that we trust your new accusations, that we trust your new findings, and at the same time you continue your manipulations, you continue to issue fabrications and to advance heinous double standards. Only a blind man will not notice the fact of use of prohibited chemical substances by the Kiev regime, and this is something which we regularly inform the OPCW at The Hague about, and we inform the Security Council and the General Assembly about this. Instead of this, you are trying to accuse us of that same crime, and this is despite the complete lack of any evidence and the clear indicators of the fact that these incidents have been staged, and you are now attempting to pin the blame on us. Mr. President, in light of what I have stated, I do not think it will be a surprise to you if I announce that all that you and your satellites announced during today's meeting will be viewed by us purely as elements of the baseless smear campaign against Syria and Russia. We have no basis to provide any significance to give any significance to these statements, and we categorically, in advance, refute all of the allegations which you and your colleagues will levy against us. I wish to warn you right now that we also repudiate any possible reports about any other stagings and fabrications that can be organized at the what has been seized by as following organized terrorist attacks from the HTS late last month. I refer to those territories. And when it comes to believing you and your colleagues, we have no faith, and any actions in that regard will merely result in a further undermining of cooperation through the Chemical Weapons Convention with all of the attendant consequences. We call upon you to finally give thought to this. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation would like to thank the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Madam Izumi Nakamitsu, for her briefing. I listened carefully to the briefing made by the representative of civil society. Distinguished colleagues, my delegation has noted with concern the lack of significant progress in dealing with this subject over the 2 years that Ecuador has been on this council. And that is why I would now like to share with you 3 thoughts. Firstly, Ecuador recognizes and values the efforts of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in the implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention, as well as its contribution to the implementation of pertinent resolutions of the Security Council, in particular Resolution 2118. It's unfortunate that more than a decade after the adoption of this resolution, key issues remain unresolved related to the declarations of the Syrian Arab Republic under the Convention. Ecuador would urge the Syrian authorities to fully and effectively cooperate with the technical teams of the OPCW, providing them with the information they require to guarantee adequate and complete monitoring. This step is fundamental not only for the purposes of accountability, but also in order to restore trust and commitment made under the Convention. Secondly, we salute the efforts of the Technical Secretariat of the OPCW and the Syrian authorities to restore and facilitate the rounds of consultations. My country believes that transparent dialogue and good faith cooperation are the essential tools to address the challenges relating to chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. Thirdly, impunity cannot be allowed when it comes to the use of weapons of mass destruction, and that is why, once again, my delegation expresses its concern at the findings of the OPCW Investigation and Identification Team, indicating that chemical weapons are being used by state and non-state actors. Ecuador robustly condemns these atrocious acts, and we underscore the need for exhaustive and impartial investigations to be carried out in order to guarantee that those responsible face the consequences for their actions. Mr. President, the international community is presented with a challenge in guaranteeing that chemical weapons will never be used again. Ecuador appeals to this Council to remain united on this matter. The total elimination of these weapons is not only an ethical imperative, but also an indispensable requirement for the preservation of global peace and security. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the unfailing support of Ecuador for the impartial and independent work of the OPCW and all efforts aimed at building a world free of chemical weapons. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this joint statement on behalf of the E3+, namely Guyana, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, and my own country, Algeria. We thank Madam Izumi Nakamutsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, for the briefing, and we listened carefully to the representative of the civil society. We welcome the participation in this meeting, the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Turkey. Mr. President, the E3+ reiterates its firm belief that the use of chemical weapons anywhere, by anyone, and under any circumstance must be condemned. We remain committed to ensuring accountability for such actions under international law. We have carefully reviewed the context of the 134th monthly report of the OPCW, covering the period from 24 October to 23 November 2024. We also acknowledge the submission of the 132nd monthly report dated 15 November on progress achieved by the Syrian Arab Republic on the destruction of its chemical weapons. Regarding the implementation of the Chemical Weapons Conventions, the E3+ note with satisfaction that in terms of the overall figure for destruction, 100% of declared chemical weapons had been destroyed of the 7th July 2023. In this regard, we welcome the completion of the destruction of chemical weapons stockpiles, including those declared by the Syrian Arab Republic. While recalling the decision of the Executive Council with respect to the elimination and destruction of Syrian chemical weapons and the destruction of Syrian chemical weapons production facilities, the E3+ commends the substantive effort made and the significant progress achieved in this regard. We also welcome the OPCW Director General's report on the completion of the destruction of all chemical weapons and chemical weapons production facilities declared by the Syrian Arab Republic. The E3+ acknowledges the ongoing collaboration between the Syrian Arab Republic and the Technical Secretariat, particularly the 28th round of consultation between the Declaration Assessment Team and the Syrian National Authority in Damascus. We note that the DRT is currently analyzing information gathering during this consultation, including documents, interviews, and explanation from Syrian experts. We also note that Syria has recently provided explanations regarding sample analysis results on November 11, 2024, which are currently being assessed by the DRT. The E3+ take note of the completion of the 11th round of inspections of the Balzah and Jamariyah facility of the Scientific Studies and Research Center from 12 to 20 November 2024. We note that an agreement on a 6-month extension of the tripartite agreement between the OPCW, UNOPS, and the Syrian Arab Republic is being finalized. We remain committed to the imperative against the use of chemical weapons and to all efforts aimed at prohibiting their development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, retention, transfer, or use. The E3+ reaffirmed its continuing support for Resolution 2118 and underscores the importance of its full implementation. The E3 Plus looks forward to the continuation of the existing successful cooperation between the OPCW and the Syrian Arab Republic on all issues in order to close this file permanently. We believe that through sustained dialogue and mutual understanding, further progress can be achieved in addressing the remaining concerns. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Switzerland. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie la haute
President, I
représentante
wish
aux
to
affaires
thank
de
the High
désarmement,
Representative for
Madame
Disarmament
Nakamitsu,
Affairs,
pour
Madame
sa
Nakamitsu, for
présentation.
her
Et nous
presentation.
prenons également note de
We
la
also take
présentation
note
de
of the
Monsieur
presentation of Mr. Nidal
Shikani,
Shikani, Director General of the Chemical Violations Documentation Center of Syria. On 5 January 2023, Switzerland took part in its first meeting within this council, which focused on chemical weapons in Syria. Since then, throughout its mandate, Switzerland has consistently insisted on three specific priorities in this matter. First priority is as follows. Switzerland has always called for cooperation between the Syrian government and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW. We have encouraged a series of consultations between the Declaration Assessment Team and the Syrian government. In this regard, in our previous statement, we expressed our expectations following the DAT's visit to Syria in mid-September, the conclusions of which have yet to be communicated. However, it is very regrettable and worrying for Switzerland that the Secretary General's latest monthly report still lists 19 unresolved issues. When we joined the Council in January 2023, the same report mentioned 20 unresolved issues. The flagrant lack of progress is all the more unacceptable given that these issues concern potentially large quantities of munitions and chemical agents whose production has never been declared and whose destruction has never been formally certified by the OPCW. Verifiable and scientifically plausible answers must be provided by Syria if it is to regain its rights and privileges as a state party to the Chemical Weapons Convention and fulfill its obligations under the resolutions of this Council. Until these answers are provided, Syria will be in violation of its obligations under the CWC and the resolutions of this Council. Mr. President, Resolution 2118 stipulates that those responsible for the use of chemical weapons in Syria must be held accountable. To ensure compliance with this provision and with international law, the fight against impunity has been Switzerland's second priority during its tenure on the Council. Those who manufacture, possess, and even use such weapons must not go unpunished. In this spirit, we wish once again to welcome the formal cooperation between the OPCW and the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism for Syria, and we hope that their collaboration will continue along this path. Finally, the third priority. Switzerland has consistently reiterated support for and confidence in the OPCW and all its missions, emphasizing their professionalism and integrity. In this respect, we welcome the 29th session of the Conference of States Parties, which took place at the end of November in The Hague, at which Switzerland rejected any attempt to discredit the work of the OPCW. In this respect, we supported the conclusions of the OPCW's identification and investigation team in early 2023, which postulated that there were reasonable grounds to believe, quote-unquote, that the perpetrators of the attack in Douma in April 2018 were members of the Syrian Air Force. We also supported the conclusions of March 2024 relating to a chemical weapons attack carried out by the Islamic State organization in Mareya in 2015. Mr. President, by way of conclusion, the end of Switzerland's mandate on the Security Council does not mean its disengagement on the issue of chemical weapons in Syria and beyond. Quite the contrary. Switzerland will continue to call for the strengthening of multilateralism in this area and to support any international initiative geared against the use or proliferation of chemical weapons in all circumstances. 5 days after the day of commemoration of all victims of chemical warfare, this Council and the international community community must speak in one voice and reaffirm their commitment to the Chemical Weapons Convention to put an end to impunity and to implement the Pact for the Future in favor of a world free of these weapons. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Mr. President, I would like to thank Madam Nakamitsu and Mr. Shikani for their briefings. The last report of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, transmitted to this Council on the 26th of November, bears witness once again to the absence of verifiable progress towards the elimination of the Syrian chemical weapons program. It's more than 11 years now since Syria joined the Chemical Weapons Convention, and in this regard it has the obligation to renounce the use of these weapons and to proceed to the total destruction of its stockpiles. However, international independent inquiries have documented at least 9 cases of the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian regime since it joined the convention. Moreover, despite the holding of 28 rounds of consultations, the OPCW teams have still not received adequate answers with regard to the status of the Syrian chemical program. The same finding is made in monthly reports by the organization. The declaration of the Syrian authorities cannot be considered to be exact and complete with regard to the requirements of the convention. The assessment team for the initial declaration indicates that 19 questions remain pending. Let's be clear, these questions don't relate to issues of form or procedure. They relate to the stockpiles of military chemical weapons where the destruction has not been able to be verified with certainty. Two new questions have been opened this year, in addition, relating to the non-declaration of potential activity. The OPCW underlines that these are subjects for serious concern. We therefore strongly urge the Syrian regime to finally commit to a good faith cooperation with the OPCW teams and to finally respect its obligations and abstain from any use of chemical weapons in the context of military developments underway in the northwest of Syria. This is the only way that it will be able to recover its rights and privileges as a state party to the convention. We are mindful of the threat of chemical terrorism, illustrated by the attacks committed by Daesh in Syria. Any use of chemical weapons by whomever, wherever, and under whatever circumstances must be condemned. This is France's commitment and that of its partners within the partnership to fight impunity with regard to the use of chemical weapons. France reiterates its support for the work of the OPCW and its teams. We support and co-sponsor the biannual resolution on cooperation between the OPCW and the United Nations, which must soon be presented to the General Assembly. Our commitment remains intact to ensure respect for the norms prohibiting the use of chemical weapons and to ensure that their use will not go unpunished. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, the High Representative for Disarmament, for her detailed and objective briefing. I also took note of statement by Mr. Nidal Shikahani, Director General of the CVDCS. Mr. President, the use of chemical weapons should never be tolerated anywhere at any time, by anyone under any circumstance. Japan commends the professional and impartial work by the OPCW. Japan strongly opposes any attempts to undermine their authority and invaluable work. It is truly regrettable that we have not witnessed tangible progress on the Syrian chemical weapons file since our last meeting. The OPCW Director General's recent monthly reports have once again highlighted concerns regarding Syrians' actions. Notably, there remain 19 outstanding issues that require resolution. We emphasize the urgency of addressing these matters and call upon Syria to engage sincerely in resolving these issues. According to the recent monthly reports of the OPCW, the outstanding issues involved large quantities of chemical warfare agents and munitions. Due to the lack of declaration by Syria, the OPCW cannot fully verify Syria's past activities. Once again, we express our deep concern regarding the persistent contradictions, gaps, and inconsistencies in Syria's initial and subsequent declarations. These concerns have been reaffirmed in the latest report by the OPCW Director General. In this regard, Syria must comply and faithfully execute its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and Security Council Resolution 2118. Mr. President, Japan firmly believes that preventing the recurrence of chemical weapon use in Syria must remain a priority for the Security Council. We would like to emphasize that addressing these issues step by step is crucial for maintaining and strengthening the norms against the possession and the use of chemical weapons. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I also thank High Representative Nakamitsu and Mr. Shikani for their briefings. It is important that the Security Council continues to hold periodic discussions on this specific matter. I also express our sincere appreciation for the OPCW and the work of its technical teams. They carry out their mandate impartially, professionally, and in adherence to the highest international standards. The work of the OPCW is crucial in upholding the international prohibition of chemical weapons. Over the past 2 years, we have continuously called out any attempt to undermine its credibility and authority, including within this Council. Malta has repeatedly condemned, in the strongest terms, the use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances. Their use is unconscionable and completely contrary to the international standard. This Council should be united in condemning any use of chemical weapons and in urging Syria to make progress towards the total elimination of its chemical weapons stockpile. Regrettably, during our 2 years on the Security Council, no substantial progress has been made on this file. On the contrary, the Secretariat has assessed the presence of undeclared chemical warfare agents in Syria. This is unacceptable. Mr. President, Syria has continued to obstruct the work of the OPCW, including by denying access to some of its personnel and by delaying the process in violation of Resolution 2118 and the Chemical Weapons Convention. Furthermore, Syria has failed to provide the Secretariat with all the requested information on its undeclared stockpile, which resulted in the opening of 2 additional outstanding issues. In the latest OPCW report, the Secretariat has also expressed serious concerns about the issue, since the chemical warfare agents and munitions were, quote, reportedly destroyed or otherwise consumed, end quote, before Syria's accession to the Convention. While acknowledging some progress made by Syria, including the holding of new rounds of consultations, as well as the closing of some outstanding issues, we regret its continued delays. The Syrian government has yet to provide the Secretariat with plausible and unequivocal explanations of its undeclared chemical warfare agent stockpile. In light of these, as well as other persisting gaps and inconsistencies, the Secretariat continues to assess that Syria's initial declaration cannot be considered accurate and complete in accordance with the Convention, as well as Resolution 2118. In closing, Mr. President, we urge the Syrian Arab Republic to make progress towards the complete and verifiable elimination of all its chemical weapons stockpiles without delay. We hope that this Council will be able to uphold the resolution that it unanimously adopted now more than 10 years ago. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, President. And thank you, High Representative Nakamitsu and Director General Shikini for their insightful briefings. To note, the UK will continue to defend the right of competent civil society to participate in this council as enshrined in Rule 39. In the last week, we have seen a significant escalation of violence spreading across northwest Syria. The UK repeats its call for de-escalation, for the protection of civilians, and for the provision of humanitarian aid. We underscore the need for a Syrian-led political solution and renewed negotiations. We call on all parties to respect international law, including the Chemical Weapons Convention. Any use of chemical weapons is unacceptable. Colleagues, the 30th of November marked the International Day of Remembrance for all victims of chemical warfare. Let us take a moment to recall the appalling human cost of the previous chemical weapon attacks in Syria. The Assad regime's sarin nerve attack in Ghouta in 2013 killed over 1,400 civilians, including hundreds of women and children. When the attack came in the small hours of the morning, families fled to their basements to seek safety. The sarin gas, however, was heavier than air, sank down, trapping and killing them indiscriminately. Facing international condemnation, Syria became a party to the Chemical Weapons Convention that year. But the attacks continued. Sarin in April 2017, chlorine gas in Douma in 2018, and many more. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Syrian Arab Republic has found that Syria has used chemical weapons on no fewer than 38 occasions since 2013. The Assad regime has shown us repeatedly that it is willing to use chemical weapons against Syrian families in their homes. Independent international investigations have confirmed it. Under Assad, Syria ignores its obligation under the Chemical Weapons Convention and UN Security Council Resolution 2118 to cooperate fully with the OPCW. Syria continues to hide its chemical weapons program. Thousands of munitions and hundreds of tons of chemical agent remain unaccounted for. We are therefore concerned that the Russians seem to be able to predict the future and tell us that any reports of future chemical weapon use in northwest Syria are untrue. At a time when tensions remain high in the Middle East, Syria's undeclared chemical weapons are an unacceptable risk. It is past time for the regime to comply with its obligation under Security Council Resolution 2118, cooperate with the OPCW Technical Secretariat, and fully declare its chemical weapons programme. Only then can we consign Syrian chemical weapons to history. There is no time out of the use of chemical weapons. The international community will not forget. Perpetrators must be held to account, no matter how long it takes. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also would like to express gratitude to USG Nakamitsu for her informative briefing. I also thank Director General Shikani for his briefing. The recent escalation in Syria serves as a stark reminder of the grave risk posed by unaccounted for chemical weapons falling into the wrong hands. Let me underscore the following in this regard. The Republic of Korea reiterates its profound concern regarding the outstanding issues surrounding Syria's compliance with the CWC and the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2118. Despite Syria joined the CWC over a decade ago, the full verification of this declaration has yet to be achieved. This situation leaves substantial quantities of chemical weapons unaccounted for, posing a significant threat to regional and global security, as territorial losses quickly exacerbate the power vacuum. Excuse me. We take note of the Declaration Assessment Team, DAT's recent visit to the Scientific Studies and Research Center in Barza and Zamlaya. We look forward to the forthcoming analysis in this regard and strongly urge Syria to provide comprehensive and accurate information to the OPCW Secretariat to address all remaining discrepancies. Furthermore, we urge the Syrian Arab Republic to demonstrate meaningful cooperation with OPCW. Excuse me. Unfortunately, Syria's track record in this regard remains inadequate, which significantly hinder the effectiveness of OPCW's mission and exacerbate the unresolved issues surrounding Syria's compliance. The recent OPCW report suggests that Syria continues to fall short of meaningful cooperation with the organization. Despite submitting voluminous information this year, Syria has yet to clarify key discrepancies, further delaying resolution of outstanding issues and raising concerns about its commitment to transparency and accountability. These actions undermine the effectiveness of OPCW's efforts to resolve 19 outstanding issues. As such, the Republic of Korea strongly calls on Syria to demonstrate greater transparency and cooperation to fully comply with its international obligations, ensuring that no Syrians, regardless of politics, sects, or region, ever suffer from the horrors of chemical weapons again. In conclusion, the Republic of Korea urges all parties to fully adhere to their obligation under the Chemical Weapons Convention and relevant Security Council resolution. Such adherence is essential for the maintenance of international peace and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to thank High Representative Nakamitsu and Director General Shikani for their informative briefings. Mr. President, let me begin by stressing that the use of chemical weapons is unacceptable. We condemn in the strongest possible terms any use of chemical weapons by anyone, be it a state or non-state actor. The repeated use in recent years in the Syrian Arab Republic and elsewhere is indicative of the remaining relevance of this threat to the international peace and security. As events rapidly unfold in and around Aleppo, our concern is increasing. Chemical weapons have been used in that city before. The world is watching, and so should this Council. Mr. President, Slovenia would like to express its unwavering support to the work of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and thank its Director General for his regular reporting to the Council. We reiterate that the efforts of the organization are pivotal to ensure Syria's compliance with its obligations deriving from the Chemical Weapons Convention. Slovenia remains concerned with the fact that after a decade since Syria submitted its initial declaration, 19 questions remain unresolved. What is more, 2 new outstanding issues cropped up, which is an obvious step in the wrong direction. We urge Syria to comply with its obligations under the Convention, implement relevant Security Council resolutions, and fully cooperate with the OPCW by providing the necessary information in order to resolve the outstanding issues and ensuring unfettered access to the OPCW to relevant sites. Slovenia remains fully committed to preventing the re-emergence of the use of chemical weapons and ensuring the accountability of the perpetrators of the attacks with chemical weapons in Syria and elsewhere. In this regard, we are confident that a multilateral approach with the Chemical Weapons Convention and the OPCW and its fundamental pillars can deliver a world without chemical weapons. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China. You have the floor.
President, I thank High Representative Nakamitsu for the briefing. On the issue of chemical weapons, China's position is consistent. China firmly opposes use of chemical weapons by anyone under any circumstances and hopes to see a world free of all chemical weapons as soon as possible. China maintains that dialogue and consultation is the only right way to resolve the relevant issues of Syrian chemical weapons. We welcome the 28th round of technical consultations between the Syrian government and OPCW in mid-September. We encourage the Technical Secretariat and the Syrian government to strengthen communication and meet each other halfway based on mutual respect and cooperation and equal footing, with a view to resolving outstanding issues as soon as possible. OPCW's investigation of and accountability for the alleged users of chemical weapons should be carried out in strict accordance with the provisions of the CWC and Verification Annex to ensure compliance with the established procedures, reliability of evidence, and credibility of conclusions. We hope that parties will work together to safeguard the technical nature of the OPCW and avoid politicizing relevant issues. Recently, terrorist forces inter alia HTS have launched massive military operations in northwest Syria, leading to drastic deterioration in the security situation. China supports Syria in taking measures to safeguard national security and stability. We hope all relevant international parties should respect sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria and uphold a uniform standard and zero-tolerance attitude towards terrorism when it comes to counterterrorism efforts. And in conclusion, likewise, we would like to express our concern about the arrangement for a second briefer at this meeting. We hope the rotating presidency going forward should engage and consult with council members beforehand and make arrangements based on consensus. I thank you.
I thank the representative of China for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. Let me first thank Undersecretary General Nakamitsu for her briefing. And thank you, Mr. Shikani. Your testimony highlights the gravity of the situation facing the Syrian people. Let me just say very briefly, a very, very small group of states present in this chamber would obviously prefer to hide the truth about the Assad regime's repeated use of chemical weapons against the Syrian people. The truth cannot be hidden. The perpetrators of these acts will not be able to hide. They will be held accountable. And Mr. Shikani, thank you for your contribution to this effort to hold the perpetrators accountable. Let me add one other thing before going into my statement. The Russian statement this morning was a sad moment for this council. We heard nothing but lies, pathological prevarication, personal attacks. The statement was right out of the Russian playbook. Blame others, ridicule the professionalism of the international mechanisms and their employees, and then claim as illegitimate the findings of these international bodies, and then state that any future evidence of chemical weapons use is not to be trusted because of its political nature. Colleagues, the United States is closely monitoring the situation in Aleppo and Idlib and are in contact with partners on the ground. We have seen some reports of human rights abuses, and we hope to see those now in control of Aleppo and Idlib hold those accountable who have perpetrated these abuses and promote fair and equal rights and access to resources. The litmus test for any government is the way the most vulnerable populations are treated. The events currently unfolding in Syria are a reminder of the relevance of the Council's regular meetings on Syrian chemical weapons and the continued applicability of Resolutions 2118 and 2254. Indeed, it is in situations like the one we face today, when the Assad regime feels most at risk, and this is important, that the regime previously unleashed chemical weapons on its own people. Over the years, the Assad regime and its backers have attempted to distort the truth through lies and elaborate campaigns of misinformation about these chemical weapons attacks and those who have documented them. The facts are obvious, and no one should be fooled by these cheap tricks. Investigations by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons Investigation and Identification Team and the UN OPCW Joint Investigative Mechanism impartially and independently confirmed that the Syrian regime was responsible for 9 chemical weapons attacks. The Director General of the OPCW is clear on this. To this day, the Syrian regime has not declared all elements of its chemical weapons program as required by the Chemical Weapons Convention. These elements include large quantities of chemical warfare agents and munitions, but the OPCW cannot verify what happened to them because Syria refuses to answer inspectors' questions. Equally concerning is the fact that, per the OPCW Director General, the Syrian Arab Republic failed to sufficiently explain traces of undeclared chemical warfare agents in samples collected in 2020, 2023, and 2024. Consequently, the OPCW Director General has concluded that, and I quote, despite more than a decade of intensive work, the Syrian Arab Republic chemical weapons dossier still cannot be closed. End of. As we said last week's 29th Conference of the States Parties, if Syria had the capacity to produce chemical weapons, then it has the capacity to tell the world what happened to them. Colleagues, at this moment, when we see the regime and its backers ramping up attacks on civilians in Aleppo and Idlib, our message is simple. The eyes of the international community are on you and will remain on you until justice and accountability are reached. The United States firmly believes the Security Council must remain seized of the Syrian chemical weapons dossier. Syria's chemical weapons program is not a relic of the past, it's a threat to international peace and security. Let's not ignore the facts. Costs by organizations like the White House, independently and impartially confirmed, and the UN. Let's not forget that Resolution 2118 includes decisions that all UN member states must carry out, and it establishes obligations on the Syrian regime that are still valid today. And let's not forget Resolution 2118's call for those responsible for the use of chemical weapons in Syria to be held to account. The United States, therefore, calls on all member states to implement, without delay, the recommended collective measures called for in the decision by the OPCW Conference of the States Parties in 2023, including those aiming to prevent the transfer to Syria of certain dual-use chemicals and equipment. And we call on member states to join us in seeking justice for those injured and killed in chemical weapons attacks in Syria. There must be no impunity for the use of chemical weapons anywhere, at any time, by anyone, under any circumstances. I resume my function as President of the Council. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I listened with interest to your emotionally charged statement. I won't comment on your inappropriate and undiplomatic description of our statement. I would simply like to note some points. First, you completely mendaciously presented the reason behind what is transpiring currently in Syria, where the internationally recognized terrorists, designated terrorists, attacked a sovereign state, and this did not happen. This did not happen because the Syrian government has been failing to comply with certain resolutions, but this happened because the United States, instead of fighting against terrorism, has been encouraging terrorism, and for all of these years have provided cover for and whitewashed HTS terrorists. And now they are undertaking robust steps in order to requalify these thugs into some kind of rebels. We have been observing this, and we are all very much ashamed by this, Mr. President. Furthermore, you mentioned certain so-called evidence which exists related to the Syrian chemical weapons program, and I wish to remind you, Mr. President, of the fact that when the U.S. side talks about certain evidence, then the world remembers the picture. One of your former Secretary of States here had a vial was showing a vial of some substance and talked about clear evidence of certain chemical weapon substances in Iraq. You also mentioned the need for punishment of all and ensuring that justice and accountability, that there be justice and accountability, as you so enjoy referring to. But I would also like to remind you that now justice, American style, is associated for the entire world with this situation. When the U.S. president, who has sought to cling to power for the past months and days, abusing his power, has pardoned his criminal son, and everybody, despite the fact that it was stated that he would never do that. So before you deliver such hawkish statements, Mr. President, please remember how this is perceived. Consider how this is perceived throughout the entire world. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic renews its condemnation of the use of chemical weapons anywhere at any time by anyone under any circumstances. We reiterate our commitment to continue our cooperation with OPCW and its Technical Secretariat. Mr. President, 2 days ago, we've listened to warnings in this chamber by the director of the so-called White Helmets Group about the possibility of the use of chemical weapons. In light of the long record of this organization in spreading false allegations and fabrications about alleged use of chemical weapons and fabricating evidence, we warn against the Security Council listed terrorist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham al-Nusra Front and the so-called Turkestan Islamic Party, the terrorist party, fabricate incidents of using chemical weapons and attribute them to the Syrian Arab Army. Mr. President, in terms of those briefers, we recall our position that has been expressed, particularly during the last 2 sessions of this Security Council, and we recall that the same Western countries who invite those briefers, those same countries have prevented and voted against the participation of the first Director General of OPCW, Mr. José Bustani, in a session for this Council on the 5th of October 2020. The records of the Security Council are there, if you want to verify that. The reason for asking that Mr. Bustani present his briefing was to provide his remarks regarding the so-called Syrian chemical weapons file. But some Western countries asked for a vote regarding the participation of the Director General, the first Director General of the OPCW, and claimed that there was no sufficient information, experience of Mr. Bustani, and could not, so that they prevented him from participating. And so he provided his briefing during an area formula meeting of the Council, and we have expressed that in addition to the friendly Russian Federation delegation, parts of that briefing. These Western countries have prevented some of the inspectors of OPCW who were present at some sites of alleged incidents, including in Douma, from providing their briefings to this Council. We will not name the name of that inspector who you prevented from participating, and so he also presented his briefing during an informal session. This was not limited to these 2 incidents, but you prevented the participation of experts and specialized research centers that document what has happened and expose the lies that has for so long predominated the Syrian chemical weapons file, including an expert that was specialized, a professor at MIT. The reason to exclude these experts is to promote a selective, politicized point of view and to level accusations against my country for very well-known reasons that we have mentioned during the last two sessions. We said repeatedly we are not against the participation of representatives of civil society during these sessions, but we don't want the misuse of this session to undermine and level accusations against a member state that are in violation of the ethics and the conduct that is observed within this council. Mr. President, my country, Syria, continues to cooperate with the OPCW Technical Secretariat. This was very clear in the previous period as follows. First, the Syrian National Authority submitted 3 monthly reports that covered the activities that were conducted in Syria over the 3 past months. The latest such report was the monthly report 132, submitted on the 15th of November 2024. Second, the 28th round of consultations between the Syrian side and that was conducted in the period between the 10th to the 18th of September 2024. The Syrian National Authority had submitted during this round the information and the documents as well as clarifications requested regarding several of the issues listed on the agenda of the consultations. Third, the Syrian National Authority submitted to the Technical Secretariat documented scientific explanations regarding everything in response to the request about the analysis of samples collected by that during the month of May 2024. The Syrian National Authority looks forward to the professional handling by the Technical Secretariat of the submitted explanations. Fourth, in the period between the 12th to the 19th of November 2024, the 11th round of inspection had taken place. The inspection round to the Scientific Studies and Research Center. During that round, the Syrian side had provided all the necessary facilitation and logistic support needed for the inspection team, allowed them to access all sites that they have requested to visit, and provided all the necessary information and documents. The Syrian side had agreed to the request by the Technical Secretariat to conduct that round at a previous date, despite the fact that that date was not suitable for the Syrian side. However, the postponement came at the request of the Technical Secretariat as a result of the Israeli aggression against the countries in the region. Fifth, the Syrian National Authority had agreed to the extension of the tripartite agreement between Syria, OPCW, and UNOPS for an additional 6 months as of the 31st of December 2024 to facilitate the activities and tasks of the organization in Syria. My country, Syria, calls and requests again not to preempt and not to prejudice the outcomes of the ongoing consultations between the experts of the Syrian National Authority and the DAT team. We regret the fact that the organization's monthly report continued to promote politicized accusations against my country in full harmony with what is being promoted by some against my country. That the aim of these accusations is to find a pretext against Syria and find basis for illegitimate steps within OPCW, steps that some Western countries have been rallying for and have been pushing for their adoption. Ignoring the constructive and ongoing cooperation from the Syrian side and insisting on this hostile accusatory approach that has no scientific or technical basis, is a departure from the principles of neutrality, integrity, and professionalism stipulated by the Convention. It is an unjustified prejudice against a state party that has fulfilled all its obligations within the framework of this Convention. The special nature of the situation of Syria within OPCW is by no means a basis for justifying the politicization that the Technical Secretariat is practicing against it. In this regard, we stress that this approach will only lead to further complications and undermining of the credibility of the organization, diverting it from the true aims and goals of the Convention. It is regrettable that the Technical Secretariat did not only disregard Syria's cooperation, but had also, and without any justification, rushed to raise two new issues in July 2024. In this context, we reiterate that it is not allowed from a scientific and technical point of view to use the term pending matters on the results of the analysis of samples that are still being technically assessed and require further scientific and technical discussions between the experts from the two sides. Mr. President, at a time when some Western countries dedicate their efforts to target the Syrian state, including through the use of the OPCW mechanisms, these same countries, continue to disregard the request submitted by the State of Palestine to OPCW to investigate in incidents where the Israeli occupation entity had used chemical weapons during its ongoing aggression against the Palestinian people. Despite that several and a large number of countries had made the same request, including Syria, and asked the Technical Secretariat to act in order to meet this request and fulfill its mandate in this regard. This conduct shows the hypocrisy, the politicization, the lack of credibility. These countries disregard the real threat to regional peace and security and to non-proliferation regime in the form of the Israeli occupation entity's stockpile of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. These same countries go further by supporting the malicious efforts of the occupation to develop more weapons and to allow Israel to stay out of the international legal instruments that prohibit these weapons. This is also clear in the fact that these countries obstruct our efforts to establish a Middle East zone free of all weapons of mass destruction. The conduct of these countries and the selective approach they adopt, and I direct my speech towards one party, has pushed the OPCW in a maze of polarization and politicization, gravely undermining its credibility. Mr. President, Syria had fulfilled all its obligations according to the CWC and destroyed fully its stockpile of chemical weapons and production facilities. Syria does not have any kind of such weapons. Everything that is being promoted by the US and its Western allies otherwise is part of attempts for cheap political investment and manipulation of this file, using unprofessional and biased reports that were issued using a stick and carrot approach and that were prepared depending on open resources and allegations made by terrorist groups and their affiliates, and Western and intelligence agencies of their Western operators without any consideration for the standards of investigation stipulated by the Convention. We renew our demand to the Technical Secretariat to adopt an approach that is based on neutrality, objectivity, and professionalism in line with its specific mandate according to the Chemical Weapons Convention, to allow the resolution of all pending matters as soon as possible and stop the political manipulation of this file and close it permanently. Mr. President, you have to remember always that political disagreement with any country does not mean or allow that al-Nusra Front, the terrorist group, or those who lead them, or its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, does not allow them to control the city of Aleppo that is rich culturally, it's rich with its religious diversity, racial diversity, and to cause suffering to its people and transform it into a repeated model of other cities that were under the control of terrorist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda. This is very important issues that you always need to remember. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you. In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, we welcome the presence of Ms. Nakamitsu, UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, at today's briefing. Mr. President, on this agenda item, I wish to make 3 points. First, as a responsible state party to the Chemical Weapon Convention and as a nation that has suffered deeply from chemical weapons, the Islamic Republic of Iran unequivocally condemns the use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, and under any circumstances. Iran, as an active member of the OPCW, underlines the essential importance of ensuring the independence, impartial, and professional work of the OPCW. We call for the full, effective, and non-discriminatory implementation of the Convention. Iran will spare nor afford to realize objectives of this vital instrument. Second, the Syrian Arab Republic has complied with its obligation under the Convention, having destroyed its chemical weapons stockpiles and production facilities. Also, it continues its constructive engagement with the OPCW, which demonstrates its steadfast dedication to transparency and full compliance with its responsibilities. In this context, the Syrian National Committee has submitted 3 comprehensive reports over the past 3 months. It has participated in the 28th round of the consultation with the Declaration Assessment Team and provided requested information, documents, and clarification to facilitate the resolution of outstanding issues. Syria also submitted scientifically documented explanation to the Technical Secretariat in response to inquiries regarding the results of the sample analysis collected in May 2024. Syria hosted the 11th inspection round at the Scientific Studies and Research Center, granted access to requested site, and provided full logistical support. As such, Syria has extended the tripartite agreement with the OPCW and the United Nations Office for Project Service for an additional 6 months. It is essential to recognize the significant progress in Syrian cooperation with the OPCW and ensure that such developments are evaluated fairly and without politicization or bias. The OPCW must operate with strict neutrality, professionalism, and evidence-based consistency to establish fact and draw credible conclusions. We support continued constructive dialogue between Syria and the OPCW to address any outstanding issues and achieve a comprehensive resolution. This process must be guided by transparency, accountability, and impartiality. Third, We express our concerns about the use of phosphorus bombs by Israeli regime against civilian population in Gaza and southern Lebanon, which was confirmed by credible reports. These abhorrent acts represent a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and a grave affront to the principles of humanity. The use of white phosphorus, a weapon known for the indiscriminate and devastating effects, constitute a war crimes. This criminal action by the Israeli regime demand unequivocal condemnation from this body and a thorough international investigation by the OPCW. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank High Representative Nakamitsu and Mr. Shikani for their comprehensive and informative briefings. The use of chemical weapons in Syria has deepened the tragedy of the civil war and represented a grave violation of international law and human dignity. This has also prevented the prospects of moving closer to a genuine political solution to the Syrian conflict based on the Security Council Resolution 2254. It is imperative that these heinous weapons are comprehensively eradicated under the framework of the Chemical Weapons Convention and in line with the Security Council Resolutions 2118 and 2235. The use of such weapons, no matter where it occurs, represents a serious threat to the global peace and security. The spread of chemical weapons to non-state actors or terrorist organizations would be a grave threat not only to Syria but to the entire region and beyond. We have a shared responsibility to take decisive action to prevent the use of chemical weapons and ensure accountability. The United Nations and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons have been at the forefront to investigate and hold accountable those responsible for these attacks. Yet despite these efforts, much remains to be done, as Damascus continues to fail to provide a full and transparent account of its chemical weapons program. All information related to its chemical weapons stockpiles, production facilities, and past use of these weapons should be provided to the OPCW. Regular reports of the OPCW on Syria's chemical weapons declarations show that gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies persist. Syria continues to obstruct the work of the Declaration and Assessment Team in contravention of the Chemical Weapons Convention and Security Council Resolution 2118. This remains a matter of serious concern. Therefore, the international community should maintain its pressure on Damascus to fully comply with its obligations under the Convention and cooperate unconditionally with the OPCW. To this end, Turkey has supported and co-sponsored the decision on Syria taken in the 28th session of the Conference of the OPCW states parties. My country deeply condemns the use of chemical weapons anywhere, at any time, under any circumstances, and remains committed to providing the necessary support to the UN and the OPCW to advance the efforts on prohibition of such weapons. We should ensure the complete elimination of such weapons from the region and strive for a world free of chemical weapons. Mr. President, the elimination of chemical weapons must be accompanied by a genuine commitment to advancing Syria's political process. The unfolding developments once again demonstrate the urgent need for revitalizing the political process. National reconciliation, built on justice and inclusivity, is critical to ending the cycle of violence and restoring trust among all Syrians. The relevant actors must intensify efforts to support a credible political solution as outlined in Security Council Resolution 2254 without further delay. Only through a coordinated approach combining the elimination of chemical weapons, accountability, and political process can we hope to achieve lasting peace and stability in Syria. My country stands ready to contribute to this effort. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Turkey for their statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.